Chapter 1: Foundations of Human Behavior. To understand why humans behave the way they do, psychology seeks not merely to describe actions, but to uncover the forces that shape them. Behavior is never random. Even actions that appear impulsive, irrational, or self-destructive are rooted in identifiable causes embedded within neural systems, developmental experiences, emotional states, and environmental contexts. The study of human behavior therefore begins with an exploration of these foundational forces. At the biological level, behavior is inseparable from the functioning of the brain and nervous system. The human brain, consisting of billions of neurons connected through intricate networks, acts as the central command center for behavior. Neural communication through electrical impulses and chemical neurotransmitters enables perception, thought, emotion, and action. Structures such as the prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and brainstem each contribute uniquely to behavioral regulation. The prefrontal cortex governs planning, impulse control, and decision-making, while the limbic system plays a critical role in emotion, motivation, and memory. These systems operate continuously, often outside conscious awareness, shaping responses long before deliberate thought occurs. Genetics further influence behavior by providing the biological blueprint from which individuals develop. Genetic variations affect temperament, intelligence, emotional sensitivity, and vulnerability to mental disorders. However, genes do not determine behavior in isolation. They interact dynamically with environmental inputs, activating or suppressing behavioral tendencies depending on experience. Modern behavioral science increasingly emphasizes epigenetics, which demonstrates that life experiences can alter gene expression without changing DNA sequences. Stress, trauma, nutrition, and social relationships can modify how genes function, thereby influencing long-term behavioral patterns. This understanding challenges deterministic views of behavior and highlights the plasticity inherent in human development. Psychological processes form the internal framework through which biological potential is translated into behavior. Perception, cognition, emotion, and motivation collectively shape how individuals interpret reality and respond to it. Human perception is not a passive recording of the external world, but an active construction influenced by expectations, beliefs, and prior experiences. Two individuals exposed to the same situation may behave differently because they perceive it differently. Cognitive processes, such as attention, memory, and reasoning, filter information and assign meaning, guiding choices and judgments. These processes can be efficient, but are also prone to bias, leading to systematic errors in thinking and behavior. Emotion serves as a powerful driver of behavior, often overriding rational analysis. Fear promotes avoidance and survival, anger mobilizes confrontation, and joy reinforces repetition of rewarding behaviors. Emotional responses are deeply rooted in evolutionary history, having developed to enhance survival in ancestral environments. While these responses remain adaptive in many situations, they can become maladaptive in modern contexts, where threats are more psychological than physical. Chronic stress, anxiety, and emotional dysregulation can distort behavior, impair decision-making, and contribute to mental health disorders. Understanding emotional processes is therefore essential for explaining both adaptive and dysfunctional behavior. Motivation provides direction and energy to behavior. Human actions are guided by needs, desires, goals, and values that vary across individuals and cultures. Biological drives such as hunger and sleep operate alongside psychological motivations such as achievement, belonging, and self-esteem. Humans are uniquely capable of pursuing long-term goals that require delayed gratification, self-control, and abstract planning. However, motivation is not constant. It fluctuates in response to internal states and external reinforcement. Failures, rewards, social approval, and perceived competence all influence persistence and effort. Behavioral patterns often emerge not from isolated decisions, but from repeated motivational cycles reinforced over time. Social influences represent another foundational dimension of human behavior. Humans are inherently social beings whose survival historically depended on group membership and cooperation. Social norms, cultural values, and interpersonal relationships profoundly shape behavior, often unconsciously. From early childhood, individuals learn acceptable behaviors through observation, imitation, and reinforcement. Family, peers, educational institutions, and media serve as powerful agents of socialization. Cultural context determines what behaviors are encouraged, discouraged, or stigmatized, influencing emotional expression, communication styles, and moral judgments. The long-standing debate between nature and nurture reflects attempts to determine whether behavior is primarily shaped by biological inheritance or environmental experience. Contemporary psychology recognizes this as a false dichotomy. Behavior emerges from continuous interaction between genetic predispositions and environmental conditions. A child may inherit a temperament prone to emotional sensitivity, but supportive caregiving can foster resilience, while neglect or trauma may amplify vulnerability. Similarly, cognitive abilities can be enhanced or limited by educational opportunities and stimulation. This interactionist perspective emphasizes that behavior is neither fixed nor entirely malleable, but dynamically shaped across the lifespan. Learning plays a central role in behavioral development. Through experience, humans acquire new behaviors, modify existing ones, and suppress ineffective responses. Learning mechanisms allow adaptation to changing environments, enabling survival and growth. While some behaviors are instinctual, many are learned through association, reinforcement, and observation. Learning does not occur in isolation, but within emotional and social contexts that influence what is retained and expressed. Early learning experiences are particularly influential, as they establish patterns that often persist into adulthood. However, the capacity for learning remains throughout life, allowing for behavioral change and personal growth. Human behavior is also shaped by consciousness and self-awareness. Unlike other species, humans possess the ability to reflect on their own thoughts, emotions, and actions. This metacognitive capacity enables self-regulation, moral reasoning, and intentional behavior change. Individuals can evaluate their behavior against personal values and societal standards, experience guilt or pride, and adjust actions accordingly. However, self-awareness can also generate internal conflict, anxiety, and self-doubt. The struggle between impulse and control, desire and restraint, reflects the complexity of human behavioral regulation. Developmental processes further influence behavior across different stages of life. Biological maturation, cognitive growth, and social role transitions each introduce new behavioral challenges and adaptations. Aging introduces changes in cognition, emotion, and motivation that alter behavioral priorities. Understanding behavior requires recognizing these developmental trajectories and the cumulative impact of life experiences. Behavior cannot be fully understood without considering context. Situational factors such as stress, authority, anonymity, and perceived threat can dramatically alter behavior, sometimes leading individuals to act in ways inconsistent with their usual character. Psychological research has repeatedly demonstrated that ordinary individuals can engage in harmful or unethical behavior under certain conditions. This insight challenges simplistic explanations that attribute behavior solely to personality traits. Instead, it highlights the powerful influence of situational variables and the importance of environmental design in promoting ethical and adaptive behavior. Psychology draws upon biology, neuroscience, sociology, and anthropology to construct comprehensive explanations of behavior. No single perspective is sufficient. Biological explanations without psychological insight are incomplete, just as social theories without neural grounding lack explanatory depth. An integrative approach allows for a more accurate and humane understanding of behavior, recognizing both constraints and capacities within the human condition. Ultimately, the foundations of human behavior reveal a species shaped by evolution, yet capable of reflection, adaptation, and transformation. Behavior reflects survival mechanisms refined over millennia, molded by culture and experience, and guided by conscious intention. Understanding these foundations is not merely an academic exercise, but a practical necessity. It informs mental health treatment, education, leadership, public policy, and personal development. By examining the roots of behavior, psychology offers insight into both human limitations and human potential, laying the groundwork for meaningful change at individual and societal levels. Chapter 2: The Brain and Behavior. Human behavior is fundamentally grounded in the structure and functioning of the brain. Every thought, emotion, memory, and action originates from neural activity occurring within a highly organized biological system. The brain does not merely respond to the external world, it actively interprets, predicts, and regulates behavior in accordance with internal states and environmental demands. Understanding behavior, therefore, requires an understanding of how the brain processes information, integrates experience, and translates intention into action. The human brain is composed of interconnected regions that work in coordinated networks rather than isolated units. While different areas are specialized for particular functions, behavior emerges from their interaction. The cerebral cortex, responsible for higher cognitive processes, enables reasoning, planning, language, and self-control. Within this structure, the prefrontal cortex plays a critical role in executive functions, including decision-making, impulse inhibition, and goal-directed behavior. Damage or underdevelopment in this region can result in impulsivity, poor judgment, and socially inappropriate actions, highlighting its central role in behavioral regulation. Beneath the cortex lie subcortical structures that influence emotion, motivation, and survival-related behaviors. The limbic system, including the amygdala, hippocampus, and hypothalamus, integrates emotional significance with memory and physiological response. The amygdala rapidly evaluates stimuli for potential threat or reward, often triggering emotional reactions before conscious awareness. This mechanism enhances survival, but can also lead to exaggerated fear or anxiety when the system becomes overly sensitive. The hippocampus contributes to learning and memory formation, linking experiences to context and influencing future behavior based on past outcomes. It also contributes to alertness and basic emotional responses. These foundational systems ensure that higher cognitive processes operate within a stable physiological framework. Disruptions in brainstem functioning can profoundly alter consciousness and behavior, demonstrating that even the most basic neural structures play a role in shaping how humans interact with the world. Neural communication occurs through a combination of electrical impulses and chemical signaling. Neurons transmit information across synapses using neurotransmitters, each of which influences behavior in distinct ways. Dopamine is associated with reward, motivation, and learning, reinforcing behaviors that lead to positive outcomes. Serotonin contributes to mood regulation, emotional stability, and impulse control. Imbalances in these systems have been linked to depression, anxiety, addiction, and aggression. Behavioral patterns often reflect not conscious choice alone, but the underlying neurochemical environment in which decisions are made. The brain is not static. Neuroplasticity allows neural circuits to change in response to experience, learning, and environmental demands. Repeated behaviors strengthen corresponding neural pathways, making actions more automatic over time. This process underlies habit formation, both adaptive and maladaptive. Positive habits, such as disciplined study or emotional regulation, can become ingrained, just as harmful patterns like substance use or avoidance behavior can become neurologically reinforced. The brain's adaptability thus represents both opportunity and vulnerability. Emotion and cognition are deeply interconnected within neural networks. Traditional views that separated rational thought from emotional experience have been replaced by models emphasizing their integration. Emotional signals provide essential information that guides decision-making, prioritization, and social interaction. Individuals with impaired emotional processing often struggle to make effective decisions despite intact intellectual abilities. This demonstrates that emotion is not an obstacle to rationality, but a necessary component of adaptive behavior. Stress provides a clear example of how brain mechanisms influence behavior. Acute stress activates neural systems designed to mobilize energy and attention, enhancing performance in demanding situations. Chronic stress, however, alters brain structure and function, particularly in areas involved in memory, emotion, and executive control. Prolonged exposure to stress hormones can impair learning, reduce emotional regulation, and increase vulnerability to mental health disorders. Behavioral changes associated with chronic stress, such as irritability, withdrawal, or risk-taking, reflect underlying neural adaptations rather than simple weakness of character. The brain's predictive nature further shapes behavior. Rather than passively reacting to stimuli, the brain continuously generates expectations based on prior experience. These predictions influence perception and action, allowing rapid and efficient responses. However, inaccurate predictions can distort reality, contributing to cognitive biases and maladaptive behavior. For example, individuals with anxiety disorders may overestimate threat, leading to avoidance behaviors reinforced by neural feedback loops. Understanding behavior thus requires recognizing how internal models of the world shape external actions. Developmental changes in the brain significantly influence behavior across the lifespan. During childhood and adolescence, ongoing brain maturation affects impulse control, emotional regulation, and risk assessment. The prefrontal cortex develops gradually, reaching full maturity in early adulthood. This developmental trajectory helps explain why adolescents may engage in risk-taking behaviors despite understanding potential consequences. These behaviors reflect neurodevelopmental timing rather than moral deficiency, emphasizing the importance of age-appropriate expectations and interventions. Individual differences in brain structure and function contribute to variability in behavior. Genetic factors, early experiences, education, and trauma all shape neural development. No two brains are identical, and behavioral diversity reflects this biological individuality. While some differences confer advantage in certain environments, others may increase vulnerability to stress or disorder. A nuanced understanding of behavior acknowledges these differences without reducing individuals to their neural characteristics. Modern neuroscience has expanded understanding of behavior through advanced imaging and experimental techniques. These tools reveal patterns of neural activation associated with specific cognitive and emotional processes, offering insight into the biological correlates of behavior. However, neural data alone cannot fully explain human experience. Behavior arises from the interaction of brain activity with psychological meaning and social context. Neuroscience complements rather than replaces psychological and social perspectives. Ethical considerations also arise from increasing knowledge of the brain. As interventions capable of altering neural function become more sophisticated, questions emerge regarding responsibility, autonomy, and identity. If behavior can be modified through pharmacological or technological means, the boundaries between treatment, enhancement, and control become blurred. These issues underscore the importance of integrating scientific understanding with ethical reflection. The relationship between the brain and behavior reveals the complexity of human functioning. Behavior is neither purely voluntary nor entirely determined by biology. It emerges from dynamic neural systems shaped by experience and guided by conscious awareness. Recognizing this complexity fosters empathy, reduces stigma associated with behavioral disorders, and informs effective approaches to education, mental health, and social policy. By understanding how the brain supports and constrains behavior, psychology moves closer to explaining not only how humans act, but why they act as they do. Chapter 3: Learning, Conditioning, and Behavioral Development. Human behavior is profoundly shaped by learning. From infancy to old age, individuals continuously acquire, modify, and refine behaviors in response to experience. Learning enables adaptation to changing environments and allows humans to move beyond instinctual reactions toward flexible and complex patterns of behavior. While biological predispositions provide the capacity to learn, it is experience that determines how behavior is expressed, reinforced, or inhibited across the lifespan. Learning occurs when experience produces relatively lasting changes in behavior or knowledge. These changes may be conscious or unconscious, deliberate or incidental. Much of everyday behavior reflects learning that has occurred gradually over time, often without explicit awareness. Language acquisition, social norms, emotional responses, and problem-solving strategies all emerge through repeated interaction with the environment. Learning does not simply add new behaviors, but reshapes existing ones, strengthening some responses while weakening others based on outcomes. Associative learning represents one of the most fundamental mechanisms through which behavior develops. Through repeated pairing of events, individuals learn to anticipate outcomes and adjust behavior accordingly. Emotional reactions often arise from such associations, linking neutral stimuli with positive or negative experiences. These learned emotional responses can persist long after the original conditions have disappeared, influencing behavior automatically. Phobias, preferences, and aversions frequently reflect associative learning processes established earlier in life. Behavior is also shaped through consequences. Actions followed by rewarding outcomes tend to be repeated, while those followed by negative consequences are less likely to recur. This principle underlies much of human learning, from childhood socialization to adult habit formation. Reinforcement need not be tangible to be effective. Social approval, achievement, relief from discomfort, and internal satisfaction all serve as powerful motivators. Over time, behaviors that are consistently reinforced become habitual, requiring less conscious effort to perform. Punishment, while capable of suppressing behavior, often produces complex and unintended effects. Fear, avoidance, and resentment may accompany behavioral suppression, particularly when punishment is inconsistent or perceived as unjust. As a result, punishment alone rarely leads to lasting behavioral change without the presence of alternative reinforced behaviors. Effective learning environments emphasize guidance, feedback, and reinforcement rather than coercion. Observation plays a critical role in learning, especially in social contexts. Humans possess a remarkable capacity to learn by watching others, allowing the acquisition of new behaviors without direct experience. Children imitate caregivers, peers, and authority figures, internalizing both adaptive and maladaptive behaviors. Observational learning extends beyond simple imitation, involving cognitive evaluation of outcomes and social consequences. Individuals are more likely to adopt behaviors exhibited by models perceived as competent, admired, or similar to themselves. Learning is inseparable from cognitive processes that influence attention, interpretation, and memory. What is learned depends not only on exposure, but also on how experiences are processed. Expectations, beliefs, and emotional states shape the meaning assigned to events, influencing whether learning occurs and how strongly it is encoded. Two individuals exposed to identical conditions may learn different lessons, reflecting subjective interpretation rather than objective reality. This cognitive mediation explains why behavioral change is often unpredictable and context-dependent. Early learning experiences exert a particularly strong influence on behavioral development. During childhood, neural plasticity and dependency on caregivers create conditions in which learning rapidly shapes emotional regulation, social behavior, and self-concept. Secure and supportive environments foster exploration, confidence, and adaptive coping strategies. Conversely, inconsistent, neglectful, or threatening environments can lead to heightened vigilance, mistrust, and maladaptive behavioral patterns. These early adaptations, while often functional in their original context, may become problematic when carried into later life. Learning also contributes to the formation of identity. Through repeated interactions, individuals develop beliefs about their abilities, worth, and place in the social world. Success and failure experiences influence self-efficacy and motivation, shaping future behavior. When individuals repeatedly experience helplessness or lack of control, they may develop passive or avoidant behavioral styles. In contrast, experiences of mastery and support promote persistence and resilience. Behavioral development is not limited to childhood. Adults continue to learn and modify behavior in response to changing roles, responsibilities, and environments. Career demands, relationships, and cultural transitions require ongoing adaptation. While learning may occur more gradually with age, the capacity for change remains. Behavioral rigidity often reflects psychological barriers such as fear, habit, or belief, rather than an absence of learning potential. Maladaptive learning can contribute to psychological distress and behavioral disorders. Anxiety, addiction, and compulsive behaviors often reflect learned associations and reinforcement cycles that maintain suffering. Avoidance behaviors, while reducing short-term discomfort, can reinforce fear and limit functioning over time. Similarly, substance use may be reinforced by temporary relief or pleasure despite long-term harm. Understanding these patterns highlights the role of learning in both the development and maintenance of behavioral problems. The possibility of unlearning and relearning behavior forms the basis of many therapeutic interventions. By altering reinforcement patterns, challenging cognitive interpretations, and introducing new experiences, individuals can reshape behavior and emotional responses. Behavioral change requires repetition, consistency, and supportive conditions. Relapse is not a failure of learning, but a reflection of deeply ingrained patterns and competing reinforcements. Sustainable change involves patience and realistic expectations. Cultural context also influences learning processes. Norms, values, and expectations shape what behaviors are modeled and reinforced. Behaviors considered adaptive in one culture may be discouraged in another. Learning, therefore, reflects not only individual experience, but collective history and social structure. Cultural awareness is essential for understanding behavioral diversity and avoiding simplistic judgments. Learning represents the bridge between biological capacity and lived experience. Through learning, humans transform potential into action, shaping behavior in ways that reflect both past conditions and present goals. Behavioral development is a continuous process rather than a fixed outcome, allowing adaptation, growth, and recovery throughout life. By recognizing the central role of learning in behavior, psychology emphasizes the possibility of change while acknowledging the enduring influence of experience. Chapter 4. Personality and individual differences. Human behavior exhibits remarkable consistency across time and situations, yet equally striking variation across individuals. Personality provides the psychological framework through which these patterns of consistency and difference can be understood. It reflects enduring tendencies in thinking, feeling, and behaving that shape how individuals interact with the world. While situations influence behavior, personality contributes to predictable patterns that distinguish one individual from another. Personality develops through the interaction of biological predispositions and lived experience. Temperamental differences are observable early in life, suggesting a biological foundation for individual variation. Some individuals display heightened emotional reactivity, while others demonstrate calmness and adaptability. These early tendencies influence how individuals respond to their environment, shaping subsequent experiences that reinforce or modify initial dispositions. Over time, personality becomes increasingly stable, though not entirely fixed. Psychological theories of personality have sought to explain these patterns from multiple perspectives. Trait-based approaches conceptualize personality as a constellation of measurable characteristics that vary along continua. These traits influence behavior by biasing individuals toward particular responses across diverse situations. High levels of emotional stability, for example, are associated with resilience under stress, while high levels of conscientiousness predict persistence and goal-directed behavior. Such traits do not determine behavior rigidly, but increase the likelihood of certain patterns emerging. Other theoretical perspectives emphasize internal psychological dynamics. Psychodynamic views propose that behavior reflects unconscious conflicts, emotional needs, and defense mechanisms developed through early relationships. According to this perspective, personality represents a compromise between instinctual drives, moral constraints, and reality demands. While some aspects of this approach are difficult to measure empirically, Its emphasis on emotional depth and developmental history continues to influence clinical understanding of behavior. Humanistic perspectives highlight the role of personal meaning, self-concept, and the drive toward growth. From this view, personality reflects an individual's efforts to realize potential and maintain psychological coherence. Behavior is guided by subjective experience rather than objective reality alone. When individuals perceive acceptance and autonomy, personality development tends to support creativity and psychological health. Conversely, conditions that undermine self-worth may distort behavior and limit growth. Cognitive and social learning approaches conceptualize personality as a system of learned patterns, beliefs, and expectations. Behavior is shaped by past reinforcement, observation, and interpretation of social cues. Personality differences arise from variations in learning histories and cognitive styles rather than fixed internal traits. This perspective emphasizes flexibility and contextual sensitivity, suggesting that personality expression may change significantly across environments. Cultural norms influence which traits are valued, encouraged, or suppressed. Individualistic societies tend to emphasize autonomy, assertiveness, and self-expression, while collectivistic cultures prioritize harmony, interdependence, and social responsibility. These cultural orientations influence emotional expression, communication styles, and behavioral priorities. Personality cannot be fully understood without reference to cultural context, as behaviors interpreted as traits often reflect learned social expectations. Gender socialization further contributes to individual differences. From early childhood, individuals are exposed to expectations regarding emotional expression, assertiveness, and social roles. These expectations influence behavior and self-concept, shaping personality expression over time. While biological factors may contribute to certain differences, social reinforcement and cultural narratives play a significant role in maintaining gendered behavioral patterns. Personality continues to evolve across the lifespan, reflecting developmental challenges and role transitions. Early adulthood often involves exploration of identity and values, while later stages emphasize stability, responsibility, and generativity. Life experiences such as career success, trauma, relationships, and health changes can alter personality traits gradually. Longitudinal research suggests that while core tendencies remain relatively stable, individuals often become more emotionally regulated and socially responsible with age. Personality differences influence how individuals perceive and respond to stress. Some individuals interpret challenges as opportunities for growth, while others experience them as overwhelming threats. These differences affect coping strategies, emotional regulation, and vulnerability to psychological distress. Personality traits such as optimism, flexibility, and emotional stability are associated with better mental health outcomes, while chronic negative affect and impulsivity increase risk for maladaptive behavior. Understanding individual differences has practical implications for education, work, relationships, and mental health. Effective leadership, teaching, and therapy require sensitivity to personality variation. Interventions that align with individual tendencies are more likely to succeed than those that impose uniform expectations. Recognizing personality differences promotes empathy and reduces the tendency to attribute behavior solely to moral character. At the same time, personality should not be viewed as destiny. While tendencies influence behavior, individuals retain the capacity for reflection and change. Awareness of one's own patterns allows for intentional adjustment, particularly when behaviors no longer serve desired goals. Personality represents a dynamic system shaped by biology, experience, and choice rather than a static label. The study of personality and individual differences underscores the diversity inherent in human behavior. This diversity reflects adaptive variation rather than deficiency. By understanding how personality shapes behavior, psychology moves toward a more nuanced and humane perspective that acknowledges both common human capacities and individual uniqueness. Such understanding provides a foundation for personal growth, social harmony, and effective psychological practice. Chapter 5: Motivation, Drives, and Human Action. Human behavior is propelled by forces that energize, direct, and sustain action. Motivation, in its broadest sense, refers to the processes that initiate, guide, and maintain behavior. It explains why individuals pursue goals, engage in activities, or persist in the face of obstacles. Without motivation, even individuals with full cognitive and physical capacities would remain inactive. Understanding motivation is therefore central to understanding behavior in its full complexity. Motivation arises from the interplay of biological needs, psychological drives, and social influences. Biological drives such as hunger, thirst, sexual desire, and the need for rest are fundamental to survival. These drives generate internal tension, prompting behaviors that restore homeostasis. For instance, physiological deprivation triggers feelings of discomfort that compel an individual to seek food or water. These basic needs form the foundation upon which more complex psychological motivations develop, illustrating the continuity between biological imperatives and higher-order behavior. Psychological drives include the pursuit of achievement, mastery, affiliation, and self-esteem. Unlike basic biological needs, these drives often extend beyond immediate survival, reflecting humans' capacity for abstract thought and long-term planning. The need for achievement motivates individuals to set and pursue challenging goals, while the need for affiliation guides social interactions and relationship building. Self-esteem drives foster behaviors that maintain personal integrity and social recognition. These psychological motivations interact with biological drives, producing complex behavioral patterns that vary across individuals and contexts. Motivation is further shaped by intrinsic and extrinsic factors. Intrinsic motivation arises from internal satisfaction, curiosity, and interest in the activity itself. People engaged in intrinsically motivated behavior often experience enjoyment, absorption, and persistence without external reward. Extrinsic motivation, in contrast, relies on external incentives such as money, recognition, or approval. Both forms of motivation can drive action effectively, but intrinsic motivation is often associated with deeper engagement, creativity, and long-term persistence. Understanding the balance between these forms of motivation is crucial for designing educational, organizational, and therapeutic interventions. Human behavior reflects the influence of goal setting, self-regulation, and planning. Goals provide direction and structure to behavior, translating abstract desires into concrete action. Individuals differ in their capacity to establish and pursue goals, and this variation significantly affects outcomes. Self-regulation involves monitoring progress, adjusting strategies, and delaying immediate gratification in pursuit of long-term objectives. The ability to regulate impulses and persist through challenges is central to achievement and personal growth. Failures in self-regulation can result in procrastination, avoidance, or maladaptive coping strategies. Motivation interacts with emotion to influence the intensity and persistence of behavior. Positive emotions can enhance engagement and creativity, while negative emotions can either facilitate adaptive action or hinder performance. Fear and anxiety, for example, may prompt protective behaviors, but can also inhibit exploration and learning when excessive. Understanding how motivation and emotion interact provides insight into both adaptive and maladaptive patterns of behavior, including the conditions under which individuals flourish or struggle. Social and cultural factors exert a profound influence on motivation. Societal expectations, family pressures, and cultural norms shape which goals are pursued, how success is defined, and which behaviors are reinforced. Individuals internalize these influences, often adopting goals that align with external standards rather than personal preference. While social guidance can promote adaptive development, it can also create conflict when external expectations diverge from intrinsic desires, producing tension, stress, and behavioral ambivalence. Motivation also underlies the human capacity for resilience and persistence. In the face of obstacles or setbacks, motivated individuals adapt strategies, maintain effort, and sustain hope. Motivation interacts with cognitive appraisals, beliefs about self-efficacy, and perceived control to determine whether challenges are approached with determination or avoidance. Those with high perceived competence are more likely to persist, while those with low self-efficacy may abandon goals prematurely. This dynamic underscores the reciprocal relationship between belief, emotion, and action in shaping behavioral outcomes. Drive theories of motivation emphasize that internal tension states propel behavior toward reduction or satisfaction. Incentive theories, in contrast, highlight the role of external stimuli in directing behavior. Contemporary perspectives integrate these views, recognizing that motivation is a dynamic system influenced simultaneously by physiological states, cognitive appraisal, emotional valuation, and environmental contingencies. Human behavior is rarely guided by a single factor. Instead, multiple motivational influences converge to determine action. Motivation is not constant. It fluctuates according to internal states, situational demands, and prior experience. Fatigue, stress, and emotional depletion reduce motivational intensity, while reinforcement, success, and social support enhance it. Behavioral patterns often emerge from repeated cycles of motivation, action, and feedback, highlighting the iterative nature of human engagement. Habits and routines are products of sustained motivational processes, reflecting both reinforcement history and environmental structure. Understanding motivation provides practical insights into education, work, therapy, and personal development. Effective leadership, teaching, and coaching depend on aligning tasks with intrinsic interests while providing appropriate incentives. Interventions that enhance self-efficacy, clarify goals, and reduce unnecessary stress can promote sustained engagement and performance. Conversely, neglecting motivational factors often leads to disengagement, frustration, and suboptimal outcomes. Motivation also underlies moral, creative, and pro-social behavior. Altruism, artistic expression, and ethical action are driven by intrinsic goals, values, and internalized standards. These behaviors illustrate that human motivation extends beyond survival and self-interest, encompassing the pursuit of meaning, contribution, and personal growth. Such motivations are central to psychological well-being and the development of society, reinforcing the idea that behavior is shaped by both biological necessity and human aspiration. Ultimately, motivation bridges potential and action, providing the energy and direction necessary for behavior. It interacts with cognition, emotion, and social context to shape patterns of effort, persistence, and adaptation. Recognizing the mechanisms of motivation allows for a more comprehensive understanding of human behavior, highlighting both the challenges individuals face and the opportunities for growth. Through motivation, humans transform desires into action, obstacles into learning, and goals into achievement, demonstrating the centrality of motivational processes in the study of behavior. Chapter 6. Emotion and Emotional Regulation. Far from being irrational forces that disrupt thinking, emotions provide essential information about internal states and environmental significance. They guide attention, prioritize action, and facilitate communication, making them indispensable to adaptive behavior. Emotions arise from complex interactions between physiological arousal, cognitive appraisal, and subjective experience. When individuals encounter a situation, the brain rapidly evaluates its relevance to personal goals and well-being. This evaluation triggers physiological changes such as altered heart rate, muscle tension, and hormonal release, which prepare the body for action. Simultaneously, cognitive interpretation assigns meaning to these sensations, shaping the conscious emotional experience. Thus, emotion reflects both bodily processes and mental interpretation, rather than a single, isolated mechanism. Emotional responses evolve to enhance survival by enabling rapid reactions to threat and opportunity. Fear promotes avoidance and protective behavior. Anger mobilizes energy for confrontation, and joy reinforces behaviors associated with reward and social bonding. These emotional patterns are deeply ingrained and operate automatically, often preceding deliberate thought. While such responses remain adaptive in many contexts, they can become maladaptive when triggered excessively or inappropriately, particularly in modern environments where dangers are often symbolic rather than immediate. Emotion and cognition are inseparable in guiding behavior. Emotional signals influence attention, memory, and judgment, shaping how information is processed and decisions are made. Events associated with strong emotion are more likely to be remembered, and emotional states bias interpretation of ambiguous situations. Positive emotions tend to broaden cognitive flexibility and creativity, while negative emotions narrow focus and promote vigilance. This interaction explains why mood can influence problem-solving, risk assessment, and interpersonal behavior. Emotional regulation refers to the processes through which individuals influence the intensity, duration, and expression of their emotions. Regulation may occur consciously or unconsciously and involves strategies such as reappraisal, suppression, distraction, and acceptance. Effective emotional regulation allows individuals to respond flexibly to situations rather than reacting impulsively. It supports goal-directed behavior, social harmony, and psychological well-being. Difficulties in regulation, by contrast, contribute to emotional instability and maladaptive behavior. The capacity for emotional regulation develops gradually through childhood and adolescence. Early relationships play a critical role in shaping regulatory skills, as caregivers model emotional responses and provide external regulation before children develop internal control. Supportive environments encourage emotional awareness and adaptive coping, while inconsistent or invalidating environments may impair regulatory development. These early patterns often persist into adulthood, influencing vulnerability to stress and emotional disorders. Stress represents a particularly important context in which emotion and regulation interact. Acute stress activates emotional and physiological systems that prepare the individual for action. When stress is manageable, these responses enhance performance and adaptation. Chronic or overwhelming stress, however, disrupts emotional balance and regulatory capacity. Persistent activation of stress responses can lead to irritability, anxiety, emotional numbness, and impaired judgment. Behavioral changes associated with chronic stress reflect exhaustion of regulatory resources rather than lack of effort or motivation. Emotional expression serves important social functions. Facial expressions, tone of voice, and body language communicate internal states, facilitating social understanding and coordination. Cultural norms influence how emotions are expressed and interpreted, shaping acceptable displays of feeling. Some cultures encourage emotional restraint, while others value expressiveness. These norms affect interpersonal behavior and emotional experience, highlighting the role of social context in shaping emotion. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to perceive, understand, and manage emotions in oneself and others. Individuals with higher emotional intelligence tend to navigate social situations more effectively, maintain healthier relationships, and cope better with stress. Emotional intelligence does not imply absence of negative emotion, but rather the capacity to respond to emotion constructively. This ability can be developed through awareness, reflection, and practice, underscoring the potential for emotional growth. Dysregulation of emotion is a central feature of many psychological disorders. Anxiety disorders involve heightened fear responses and avoidance behavior, while mood disorders are characterized by persistent disturbances in emotional state. Trauma can alter emotional processing, leading to hyperarousal or emotional numbing. These patterns reflect changes in both neural systems and learned responses, emphasizing that emotional difficulties are not simply matters of willpower. Understanding emotional dysregulation provides a foundation for effective intervention and compassionate care. Emotion also influences moral behavior and social judgment. Feelings such as guilt, empathy, and compassion guide ethical decision-making and pro-social action. These emotions promote cooperation and social cohesion, reinforcing shared values. Conversely, emotional detachment or hostility can undermine moral behavior, increasing the likelihood of aggression or exploitation. Emotional processes, therefore, contribute not only to individual well-being, but also to social stability. The regulation of emotion involves balancing authenticity with social responsibility. Complete suppression of emotion can lead to psychological distress, while unregulated expression can disrupt relationships and goals. Adaptive regulation allows individuals to acknowledge emotion while choosing responses aligned with values and context. This balance supports resilience, enabling individuals to recover from adversity and maintain functioning under pressure. Ultimately, emotion provides the motivational force and evaluative framework through which behavior gains meaning. Emotional experiences shape memories, influence goals, and guide relationships, making them central to the human condition. Understanding emotion and emotional regulation deepens insight into both adaptive functioning and psychological suffering. By integrating emotional awareness with cognitive and behavioral skills, individuals can enhance well-being and navigate the complexities of human behavior with greater flexibility and understanding. Here is Chapter 7, written as a continuous professional narrative without subheadings in plain academic prose, consistent with the previous chapters. Cognition provides the mental framework through which individuals understand the world and make decisions. Perception determines what is noticed, cognition assigns meaning, and decision-making translates thought into action. These processes operate continuously, shaping behavior often without conscious awareness. Perception is not a direct reflection of reality, but an active construction influenced by sensory input, prior knowledge, expectations, and emotional state. The brain selects and organizes sensory information to create coherent representations of the environment. This process allows efficient interaction with the world, but also introduces the possibility of distortion. Perceptual differences explain why individuals may interpret the same situation in divergent ways, leading to different emotional and behavioral responses. Attention plays a critical role in determining what information enters conscious awareness. Humans are constantly exposed to more stimuli than can be processed simultaneously, requiring selective focus. Attention is influenced by motivation, emotion, and novelty, prioritizing information deemed relevant or threatening. This selectivity enhances efficiency, but can also result in important details being overlooked. Attentional biases, particularly toward negative or threatening stimuli, contribute to anxiety and maladaptive behavior by reinforcing distorted perceptions of risk. Memory supports behavior by preserving past experiences and making them available for future use. Memory is not a passive storage system, but a dynamic process subject to reconstruction and error. Emotional intensity enhances memory consolidation, while stress and interference can impair recall. Memories influence expectations, guide decisions, and shape identity. However, memory is fallible, and recollections may change over time, reflecting current beliefs and emotions rather than objective accuracy. Behavioral decisions based on memory are therefore shaped by subjective interpretation as much as factual history. Thinking and reasoning allow individuals to analyze situations, generate solutions, and anticipate outcomes. Humans rely on both deliberate, analytical processes and rapid, intuitive judgments. Analytical thinking involves conscious evaluation of evidence and alternatives, while intuitive thinking operates automatically based on pattern recognition and past experience. Both modes are adaptive, but each has limitations. Intuitive judgments are efficient but prone to bias, while analytical reasoning is effortful and susceptible to cognitive overload. Effective behavior often requires integration of both systems. Decision-making reflects the culmination of perceptual, cognitive, and emotional processes. Individuals evaluate options based on perceived risks, rewards, and personal values. Contrary to idealized models of rational choice, real-world decisions are frequently influenced by heuristics and biases that simplify complexity. These mental shortcuts reduce cognitive effort but can lead to systematic errors. Overconfidence, loss aversion, and confirmation bias influence judgment, shaping behavior in predictable yet often irrational ways. Emotion plays a critical role in decision-making by providing evaluative signals that guide choice. Emotional responses indicate the personal significance of options, influencing preference and commitment. Decisions made without emotional input are often inefficient or maladaptive, as emotion highlights priorities and consequences. However, intense emotion can also impair judgment, leading to impulsive or avoidant behavior. The relationship between emotion and cognition is therefore dynamic, with optimal decision-making requiring balance rather than suppression of feeling. Beliefs and expectations shape behavior by influencing how information is interpreted and which options are considered viable. Individuals develop mental models of the world based on experience, culture, and social learning. These models guide perception and decision-making, often operating implicitly. When beliefs are inaccurate or rigid, behavior may become maladaptive. Cognitive distortions such as catastrophizing or black-and-white thinking contribute to anxiety, depression, and interpersonal conflict by biasing interpretation and limiting behavioral flexibility. Problem-solving represents a complex form of cognition that integrates perception, memory, reasoning, and creativity. Effective problem-solving involves defining the problem, generating alternatives, evaluating outcomes, and implementing solutions. Barriers such as fixation, emotional interference, and limited perspective can hinder this process. Successful problem-solving is enhanced by cognitive flexibility, openness to feedback, and tolerance for uncertainty. These skills support adaptive behavior in complex and changing environments. Cognitive development across the lifespan influences behavioral capacity. As individuals mature, cognitive abilities such as abstract reasoning, perspective-taking, and self-reflection expand. Aging introduces changes in processing speed and memory, but accumulated knowledge and experience often compensate, supporting sound judgment. Cognitive changes interact with emotional regulation and motivation to shape behavior at different life stages. Social cognition influences how individuals perceive and interpret the behavior of others. Humans naturally infer intentions, emotions, and traits based on limited information. While this capacity facilitates social interaction, it is susceptible to bias and error. Stereotyping, attribution errors, and projection influence social behavior, often reinforcing misunderstanding and conflict. Awareness of these tendencies can promote empathy and more accurate interpretation of social situations. The interaction between cognition and environment further shapes behavior. Environmental complexity, time pressure, and information overload challenge cognitive resources, increasing reliance on heuristics. Modern environments, characterized by constant stimulation and rapid decision demands, amplify these challenges. Understanding cognitive limitations highlights the importance of supportive environments that facilitate thoughtful decision-making rather than exploit cognitive vulnerabilities. Cognition, perception, and decision-making collectively form the mental architecture of behavior. These processes enable humans to navigate complexity, anticipate consequences, and pursue goals. At the same time, they introduce biases and limitations that shape behavior in systematic ways. By understanding how cognitive processes operate and where they falter, psychology provides tools for improving judgment, enhancing self-awareness, and fostering more adaptive behavior. Such insight empowers individuals to act with greater intentionality and resilience in an increasingly complex world. Chapter 9: Behavior across the human lifespan. Human behavior is not static but evolves across the lifespan in response to biological maturation, psychological development, and changing social roles. Each stage of life presents unique challenges and opportunities that shape behavior in adaptive ways. Understanding behavior therefore requires a developmental perspective that recognizes continuity as well as change from early childhood through old age. In early childhood, behavior is largely shaped by biological dependency and rapid learning. Infants rely on caregivers for survival, and early interactions establish foundational patterns of trust, emotional regulation, and social engagement. Sensory exploration and motor development enable increasing independence, while early learning experiences shape language acquisition, emotional expression, and social responsiveness. As children grow, cognitive and emotional capacities expand, allowing greater self-control and understanding of social norms. Play becomes a central context for learning, facilitating social skills, problem-solving, and emotional expression. Through interaction with peers and adults, children learn cooperation, rule-following, and conflict resolution. Behavioral regulation improves as executive functions develop, enabling delay of gratification and goal-directed action. However, behavior remains sensitive to environmental feedback, and inconsistent or punitive contexts can disrupt healthy development. Adolescence represents a period of significant behavioral change driven by biological, cognitive, and social transitions. Pubertal maturation introduces hormonal changes that influence emotion and motivation, while ongoing brain development affects impulse control and risk assessment. Adolescents often exhibit heightened sensitivity to peer influence and novelty, leading to increased exploration and risk-taking behavior. These patterns reflect developmental timing rather than pathology, serving adaptive functions related to identity formation and autonomy. Behavioral experimentation allows exploration of alternatives and refinement of self-concept. Conflicts with authority and fluctuations in mood are common as individuals negotiate independence while remaining dependent on social support. The quality of social relationships during this period significantly influences behavioral outcomes and psychological well-being. Adulthood introduces increased stability in behavior as individuals assume long-term roles related to work, family, and community. Behavioral priorities shift toward responsibility, productivity, and relationship maintenance. Cognitive capacities support complex decision-making and long-term planning, while emotional regulation often improves with experience. However, adulthood also presents stressors related to career demands, caregiving responsibilities, and social expectations. Behavioral adaptation during this stage reflects the balance between personal goals and external obligations. Midlife often involves reflection on past achievements and future direction. Behavioral adjustments may occur in response to changing priorities, health concerns, or life events. Individuals may seek greater meaning, autonomy, or balance, influencing career and relational choices. Later adulthood is characterized by changes in physical health, cognitive function, and social roles. Retirement, bereavement, and shifting family dynamics require behavioral adjustment. While some cognitive processes, such as processing speed, may decline, emotional regulation and life satisfaction often remain stable or improve. Older adults frequently prioritize emotionally meaningful activities and relationships, reflecting adaptive motivational shifts. Behavior during this stage emphasizes maintenance of well-being and social connection. Across all stages, behavior is shaped by cumulative life experiences. Early patterns influence later outcomes, but development remains open to change. Critical life events such as trauma, illness, or achievement can alter behavioral trajectories at any age. This plasticity underscores the importance of context, support, and opportunity throughout the lifespan. Cultural and historical contexts further influence developmental behavior. Social expectations regarding education, work, family, and aging shape behavioral norms at each stage of life. Changes in societal structure and technology introduce new developmental challenges and opportunities, influencing how individuals navigate transitions. Behavior must therefore be understood within broader social and temporal frameworks. The lifespan perspective highlights both continuity and change in human behavior. While certain tendencies remain stable, behavior adapts to evolving biological capacities, cognitive resources, and social demands. Understanding these developmental patterns provides insight into the origins of behavior and the potential for growth and adaptation at every stage of life. Such understanding informs education, healthcare, and social policy, emphasizing the importance of supportive environments across the human lifespan. Chapter 10. Abnormal behavior and psychological disorders. Human behavior exists along a continuum from adaptive to maladaptive. While variation in behavior is normal and expected, certain patterns cause significant distress, impair functioning, or deviate markedly from cultural expectations. Understanding abnormal behavior involves examining the boundaries between normal variation and psychological disorder, recognizing that these boundaries are neither fixed nor universal. Abnormal behavior reflects complex interactions among biological vulnerability, psychological processes, and social context. Psychological disorders are not defined solely by unusual behavior, but by the extent to which behavior interferes with daily life, relationships, and well-being. Cultural norms play a critical role in determining what is considered abnormal, as behaviors viewed as acceptable in one culture may be stigmatized in another. This cultural relativity underscores the importance of contextual sensitivity in psychological assessment and diagnosis. Labels used to describe disorders are tools for understanding and intervention rather than definitive judgments about individuals. Anxiety-related behaviors represent some of the most common manifestations of psychological distress. Fear and worry are adaptive responses to threat, but when they become excessive or persistent, they can restrict functioning. Individuals may engage in avoidance behaviors that reduce short-term anxiety but reinforce fear over time. These patterns reflect interactions between heightened emotional reactivity, cognitive bias toward threat, and learned avoidance. Such behaviors illustrate how adaptive mechanisms can become maladaptive when regulatory balance is disrupted. Mood-related disorders involve disturbances in emotional state that influence behavior, cognition, and motivation. These disorders often involve changes in sleep, appetite, and energy, reflecting the integration of emotional and physiological systems. Behavioral withdrawal and reduced motivation may perpetuate distress by limiting access to positive experiences and social support. Personality-related behavioral patterns are characterized by enduring and inflexible tendencies that affect relationships and self-functioning. While personality traits vary widely, certain patterns may become maladaptive when they interfere with emotional regulation or social adaptation. These patterns often develop gradually and are influenced by early experiences, reinforcing cycles of behavior that persist over time. Understanding these behaviors requires a developmental perspective that considers both vulnerability and resilience. Psychotic behaviors involve disruptions in perception, thought, and reality testing. Individuals may experience distorted beliefs or perceptions that significantly alter behavior and social interaction. These experiences reflect complex neurobiological and psychological processes rather than a loss of intelligence or moral capacity. Behavioral changes associated with psychosis often challenge social understanding and require compassionate, evidence-based intervention. Trauma has profound effects on behavior and emotional regulation. Exposure to overwhelming or life-threatening events can alter stress responses, perception of safety, and interpersonal behavior. Trauma-related behaviors may include hypervigilance, avoidance, emotional numbing, or intrusive recollections. These responses reflect adaptive survival mechanisms that persist beyond the original threat. Understanding trauma-related behavior emphasizes the importance of safety, support, and gradual restoration of regulatory capacity. Substance-related behaviors illustrate the interaction between reinforcement, neurobiology, and learning. Substances may temporarily alter mood or reduce distress, reinforcing repeated use. Over time, behavioral patterns become increasingly driven by neuroadaptation and habit rather than conscious choice. Addiction reflects changes in motivation and self-regulation rather than moral weakness, highlighting the need for compassionate and comprehensive approaches to treatment. Stigma surrounding abnormal behavior often exacerbates distress and impedes help-seeking. Misconceptions about mental illness contribute to social exclusion and self-blame, reinforcing maladaptive behavior. Reducing stigma requires education, empathy, and recognition of psychological disorders as health conditions influenced by multiple factors. Understanding behavior within a biopsychosocial framework promotes respect and effective support. Assessment and diagnosis of psychological disorders rely on systematic evaluation of behavior, experience, and context. Diagnostic systems provide shared language for professionals, but must be applied flexibly and ethically. Overemphasis on classification can obscure individual experience, while insufficient structure may hinder effective intervention. Balanced assessment integrates empirical criteria with clinical judgment and cultural awareness. Intervention for abnormal behavior aims to reduce distress, enhance functioning, and promote adaptive coping. Effective approaches address biological, psychological, and social factors simultaneously. Behavioral change often requires modifying reinforcement patterns, challenging distorted cognition, and developing emotional regulation skills. Recovery is rarely linear, and setbacks reflect the complexity of behavioral systems rather than failure. Long-term improvement depends on sustained support and realistic expectations. Understanding abnormal behavior deepens insight into the full spectrum of human experience. Psychological disorders reveal vulnerabilities inherent in emotional and cognitive systems that underlie all behavior. Recognizing these vulnerabilities fosters empathy and reduces simplistic judgments. By examining maladaptive behavior through a scientific and humane lens, psychology contributes to effective treatment, social inclusion, and the promotion of mental health across diverse populations. Chapter 11. Behavior Change, Therapy, and Self-Regulation. Human behavior is not fixed. Despite the influence of biology, early experience, and social conditioning, individuals retain the capacity to modify behavior throughout life. Behavior change represents the process through which maladaptive patterns are altered and adaptive responses are strengthened. Understanding how behavior can be changed is central to psychology, as it connects theory with practical intervention, personal growth, and psychological healing. Behavior change begins with awareness. Individuals must first recognize patterns that contribute to distress or interfere with goals. Many behaviors operate automatically, reinforced through repetition and habit rather than conscious choice. These automatic patterns often persist because they provide short-term relief or familiarity, even when they produce long-term harm. Awareness disrupts this automaticity, allowing behavior to be examined rather than enacted reflexively. Self-regulation plays a critical role in behavior change. It involves the capacity to monitor internal states, inhibit impulsive responses, and align action with long-term goals. Self-regulation depends on cognitive control, emotional regulation, and motivation. Fatigue, stress, and emotional overload reduce regulatory capacity, increasing the likelihood of relapse into habitual behavior. Effective behavior change therefore requires not only intention but also conditions that support sustained regulation. Learning principles underlie most behavior change processes. Behaviors that are reinforced are likely to persist, while those that are no longer rewarded tend to weaken. Change in behavior often involves altering reinforcement patterns rather than relying on willpower alone. Introducing alternative behaviors that provide similar reinforcement increases the likelihood of success. This approach recognizes that behavior serves functions, and effective change must address those functions rather than simply suppress action. Cognitive processes significantly influence behavior change. Beliefs, expectations, and interpretations shape emotional responses and guide action. Distorted or rigid thinking patterns can maintain maladaptive behavior by reinforcing fear, hopelessness, or avoidance. Modifying these cognitive patterns enables individuals to reinterpret situations and respond more adaptively. Cognitive flexibility enhances problem-solving and reduces emotional reactivity, supporting sustained behavioral adjustment. Therapeutic interventions provide structured contexts for behavior change. Psychotherapy offers a collaborative process through which individuals explore behavior patterns, emotional responses, and underlying beliefs. Behavioral and cognitive approaches focus on identifying triggers, modifying responses, and reinforcing adaptive behavior. These interventions emphasize skill development and practice rather than insight alone, recognizing that behavioral change requires repeated experience. Emotion regulation is a central target of therapeutic change. Many maladaptive behaviors function as attempts to manage overwhelming emotion. Improving emotional awareness and tolerance reduces reliance on avoidance, aggression, or substance use. Regulation strategies that involve acceptance and reappraisal allow individuals to experience emotion without being controlled by it. As emotional capacity increases, behavior becomes more flexible and intentional. Motivation influences both initiation and maintenance of behavior change. Individuals are more likely to change when they perceive personal relevance, autonomy, and potential benefit. External pressure may produce temporary compliance, but rarely leads to lasting change. Internal motivation, supported by realistic goals and self-efficacy, sustains effort over time. Setbacks are common and reflect the complexity of behavioral systems rather than lack of commitment. Social support significantly enhances behavior change. Relationships provide reinforcement, accountability, and emotional validation. Supportive environments reduce stress and increase access to adaptive coping strategies. Conversely, social contexts that reinforce maladaptive behavior undermine change efforts. Effective intervention therefore extends beyond the individual to include relational and environmental factors. Behavior change is often non-linear. Progress involves cycles of improvement, setback, and readjustment. Relapse reflects the persistence of learned patterns rather than failure. Understanding relapse as part of the change process reduces shame and promotes continued effort. Long-term change depends on integrating new behaviors into daily routines until they become habitual. Self-regulation also involves aligning behavior with values and identity. When behavior change supports a coherent sense of self, it becomes more sustainable. Values provide meaning and direction, guiding choices beyond immediate reward or discomfort. Behavior aligned with values fosters psychological well-being and resilience, reinforcing motivation through purpose rather than external control. Technological and societal changes have introduced new challenges and opportunities for behavior change. Digital environments shape attention, reinforcement, and habit formation. While technology can undermine self-regulation through constant stimulation, it can also support change through monitoring, feedback, and access to resources. Understanding these influences allows individuals to design environments that promote adaptive behavior. Ultimately, behavior change reflects the capacity for growth inherent in human psychology. While change requires effort and persistence, it is supported by learning mechanisms, emotional regulation, and social connection. Psychology emphasizes that individuals are not prisoners of past behavior, but active participants in shaping future action. By understanding how behavior can be modified, individuals and societies can promote well-being, resilience, and adaptive functioning across diverse contexts. Chapter 12. Human Behavior in Social and Cultural Contexts. Human behavior does not occur in isolation. Every thought, emotion, and action is shaped by social interaction and cultural environment. From early development to adulthood, individuals learn how to behave through observation, imitation, and social reinforcement. Social norms, values, and shared meanings provide structure to behavior, guiding what is considered acceptable, desirable, or inappropriate within a given context. Social influence plays a powerful role in shaping behavior. Individuals often adjust their actions to align with group expectations, even when these expectations conflict with personal beliefs. This tendency reflects the fundamental human need for belonging and acceptance. Conformity, compliance, and obedience are not signs of weakness, but adaptive responses that facilitate social cohesion. However, excessive conformity can suppress individuality and critical thinking, leading to harmful outcomes when group norms promote maladaptive behavior. Interpersonal relationships significantly influence emotional expression and behavioral patterns. Attachment experiences shape expectations of trust, intimacy, and support. Secure relationships foster emotional regulation and adaptive coping, while insecure or unstable relationships may contribute to anxiety, withdrawal, or aggression. Behavioral patterns within relationships often reflect early learning and are reinforced through repeated interaction, highlighting the importance of relational context in understanding behavior. Culture provides a framework through which behavior is interpreted and expressed. Cultural values influence communication styles, emotional expression, and moral judgment. Individualistic cultures tend to emphasize autonomy, personal achievement, and self-expression, while collectivistic cultures prioritize harmony, interdependence, and social responsibility. These cultural orientations shape behavior in subtle yet profound ways, influencing motivation, decision-making, and interpersonal conduct. Social identity contributes to behavior by linking the self to group membership. Individuals derive meaning and self-worth from their social roles and affiliations. Group identity influences behavior by reinforcing shared norms and values, often strengthening in-group loyalty while increasing bias toward outgroups. These processes are fundamental to social organization, but can also contribute to prejudice and conflict when rigid boundaries are maintained. Communication is a primary mechanism through which social behavior is expressed. Verbal and nonverbal cues convey intention, emotion, and social status. Misinterpretation of these cues can lead to conflict and misunderstanding, while effective communication promotes cooperation and mutual understanding. Cultural differences in communication style highlight the importance of context and perspective in interpreting behavior accurately. Power and authority influence behavior by shaping expectations and control. Individuals in positions of authority can direct behavior through reward, punishment, and social influence. While authority can promote order and coordination, it can also lead to abuse when unchecked. Understanding how power affects behavior is essential for promoting ethical leadership and preventing harm within social systems. Social learning processes explain how behavior is acquired and maintained within cultural contexts. Individuals learn not only through direct experience, but also by observing others. Media, family, and peer groups serve as powerful models, transmitting behavioral patterns across generations. This process explains the persistence of both adaptive and maladaptive behaviors within societies. Stress and behavior are deeply influenced by social conditions. Economic inequality, discrimination, and social instability increase psychological strain and shape coping behavior. Chronic exposure to adverse social environments can alter emotional regulation and increase vulnerability to maladaptive behavior. Addressing behavioral health, therefore, requires attention to structural and social factors, not solely individual responsibility. Prosocial behavior reflects the capacity for cooperation, empathy, and altruism. Helping behavior strengthens social bonds and promotes collective well-being. While prosocial actions may involve personal cost, they are reinforced through social approval and internal satisfaction. Cultural values strongly influence the expression of altruism, shaping who is helped and under what conditions. Understanding human behavior in social and cultural contexts reveals the interdependence between individuals and society. Behavior both shapes and is shaped by social systems, creating dynamic patterns of influence. Psychological insight into these processes supports social harmony, cultural sensitivity, and effective intervention. By recognizing the social foundations of behavior, psychology contributes to more inclusive and adaptive communities.